With everything going on in the world, people need to be uplifted. They need something that promotes character, creativity, confidence, and joy. The GRN show is not just an average talk show. The topics are powerful and will make you think. Join me on this journey to be informed, to relate, to connect, and to evolve.
Good evening and welcome. The sights we've seen regarding Haitian migrants trying to get into the United States through Del Rio have been hard to watch. Over 14,000 Haitian migrants, including pregnant women, children, and babies, camping under a bridge in Del Rio, Texas. They traveled for weeks to get to that point. Last weekend, Border Patrol agents using horse lariats to handle people at the border has created an outrage, not only from the Haitian American community, but throughout the world. Why are Haitians subject to this type of treatment? Some say it is an immigration issue. Others say it is pure racism. It is a complex issue with so many nuances, and I hope this evening's program will help us shed some light to better understand why did things go so wrong after so many promises by the administration. With us this evening is Wen Cooney. She is the CEO and co-founder of Politicking, and she's also an editor for the Creole. Hello, and good evening and welcome.
Hi, Gatel. Nice seeing you. It is a pleasure being with you tonight. And like you said, I hope that we can demystify some issues.
Yes, yes. And it's like there is new development every day, and the pressure is on. So, but tell us before we begin, I really would like for my viewers to hear a little bit about politicking, the development of your app, and what was your vision and what is your vision?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So, as you mentioned, my name is Winkuni Sayon. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Politicking. Politicking is a social political mobile application meant to galvanize millennials between the ages of 18 and 35, particularly to get engaged in local, state, and federal politics. And the way we do that, Gatel, is through a smartphone application. We know that my generation stays on the apps. And so myself and my co-founder decided what better way to engage them politically than to meet them where they are. And so with our application, you can put in your address and you can actually see the elected officials that represent you on a state, local, and federal election. So it's extremely important during times of elections, but it's also extremely important during times like these when there are hot topic issues. You can also read articles on the app, etc. So really, it's supposed to help millennials become more civically engaged and have more conversations like the one we're having today, frankly.
I am loving it. I am loving it because again, very often it's difficult to really engage others in the community. And I won't say all millennial, but quite often it's just there's a lack of engagement. And, some might even say it's not even important to vote. Why am I going to vote anyway? We're not going to win. So I think it's a wonderful product. And I really am hoping that in the next, year or so, we will be able to use it for sure before 2024 and 2022 as well here
Yes.
in Florida.
You guys can use it now. Actually, it's spelled Politicking. I'm wearing my shirt. It's in app stores. You can download it on iOS or Google Play. No matter what phone you have, you can download it now. And so I urge all of your listeners to check it out when they get a chance.
Awesome, awesome. Now let's get to the subject at hand. You know, when you think of 14,000 and families, people with children crossing from Chile, from Panama to get to Del Rio, it is a very dangerous trip. How did these migrants make their way to Texas? And I'm still trying to understand why.
So that's a great question, Gatel. So the migrants that we're seeing that are congregated at the border and have been there for the last week or so, most of them are migrants that left Haiti after the 2010 earthquake that we know took over 200,000 lives, right? So Haiti was in a state of destitution. This perilous event had happened, and a lot of people chose to evacuate. What they did was they flew or boated to these countries, like you said, Chile, Bolivia, Colombia. So they went to Latin America, and a lot of them actually settled there, Gatel. They lived there for 5 years. They started businesses, they built families, but oftentimes they found themselves confronted with issues with paperwork, immigration issues, just like the ones they're facing today. And so a lot of folks thought, hey, I better continue heading north to the United States, where at least I'll be given the opportunity to seek asylum. Because of the United States has been heralded as an immigration champion. I put that in parentheses because we see that's not necessarily the case at all times. So a lot of them went through this really, really rough trek, like you said, through Colombia, through Chile, and they went through this really rough area in Panama, in the Panamanian jungle, where they had to face drug traffickers called narcos. They had to face the elements. They had to face all of the animals that are in the forest, and they're going by foot with children sometimes. So if you can imagine, food is scarce, water's scarce. And so they finally make it to Mexico, a place where they think that they can have respite to cross into the United States. And they realize that they're being turned around, and can tell 1,000 Haitians have already been deported. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we're already turned around and returned to Haiti, repatriated, and a lot of them have not been in their country in 10 years. So can you imagine?
This is very, and that's the part that very often people don't understand. You have a number of families who actually have new families wherever they land. And if they are deported back home, they know nothing of the land. Or someone may have left at the age of 10. Now you're 20 years old, you find yourself in a country, you have no knowledge of the system and so forth. So, which brings me to the whole question of, obviously, there were some measures that were put in place by the previous administration. Title 42. Tell us what Title 42 does, and how was that the guideline followed this time with the migrant in Del Rio?
So Title 42 is an ordinance that was actually set under the Trump administration. That's what a lot of people don't know. It was set under the Trump administration. It was set quite recently because of the pandemic. So last year in 2020 is when the Title 42 ordinance was actually passed. And what it was because we were in a pandemic, it said that people can be expelled from the country quickly without giving them a chance to actually apply for asylum because of the public health crisis. So inherently, Gatel, the actual legislation was not designed to be racist. However, we're seeing it applied in a racial way. So this was for everybody. Anybody that came to the United States could be quickly expelled without the chance to apply for asylum. But we saw people getting asylum in the United States as recently as 2 weeks ago. I'm talking about the Afghani refugees.
Right.
And you and I can agree, Gatel, this is an equally important issue. A miscarriage of justice anywhere is an atrocity. And so it's not our argument that the Afghanis should not be given refuge. We're just saying, what about us?
What about us? And for me, I think there is some confusion as well because as late as July, the administration extended TPS for Haitians. So on one hand, we are your friends, we understand, we are welcoming you. And with this action, it's totally different. And again, why is it, would you say it's an immigration crisis or would you say it's racism? Give me your thoughts on that.
I would say realistically, what we're seeing being manifested at the border as far as how these migrants have been treated is inherently racist. I don't think Title 42 was supposed to be aimed towards any one particular group, but we see that this country has a pattern of cherry picking, particularly where immigration has been concerned. We only turn back to the 1990s, around the time where I was born, not to age myself, but I grew up in South Florida, and I know that you are in South Florida currently, Gatel, and I know you remember an Alien Gonzalez case. And
Absolutely.
that was the shot heard around the world, but what was more fundamental to that a lot of people didn't know was the policy of wet foot, dry foot. The wet foot, dry foot policy was something that was largely enforced under the Clinton administration, another Democratic administration. So this is not a political party issue. This is an immigration issue. This is a political issue. It's not a party issue. So the wet foot, dry foot policy, Gatel, actually said that Cubans that were taking those ships from Cuba and arriving in South Florida, in the Florida Keys specifically, were allowed to stay because they were fleeing from ideological persecutions, i.e. communism. The United States was not supporting the Castro regime. And so they wanted to support the Cubans that were fleeing, but the Haitians were also fleeing at the same time. They were trying to avoid persecution as well, but because the United States didn't see it as an ideological issue, because Haiti is still technically democratic, they weren't granting these Haitians refuge. But what most people can see is that it whittled down to a skin color issue. Most Cubans that were coming, that had the funds to come, were white. Most Haitians that were arriving were Black. So it was clear as day an immigration issue that was founded in race. And I encourage all of your listeners to look up the wet foot, dry foot policy. It was only repealed as recently as the Obama administration. This is recent.
That is correct. And you know, one of the things that really kind of came to mind is when you look at the reason why people seek asylum. In order to seek asylum, you have to be in the United States.
Yes.
And so the migrants in Del Rio, can they claim asylum? They're on the border.
So it depends on what side of the bridge they're on, because the Del Rio International Bridge is right between Mexico and Texas. So if they have made it to United States land and they have the right reasoning, a lot of people don't realize asylum, you have to be leaving for fear of your life, fear of persecution, whether it be religious, ideological, etc. You can't just say you came for a better life. Asylum means the United States is literally rescuing you. So if you're saying, hey, I was persecuted by the Duvalier regime, which a lot of Haitians did back in the 1960s, then you can apply for asylum. A lot of academics left, etc. There was the whole brain drain scenario that happened in which all the intellectuals of the country left. So this was back in the 1960s, but now we see a lot of people saying that they're leaving for other issues, and the United States is kind of deciding whether their reasoning is good enough. So if they're leaving for the earthquake, if they're leaving because of persecution, if they're leaving for financial reasons, all three of those are different. Some may qualify for asylum, some may not.
Got you. And refugees, of course, to kind of define that and How is one a refugee? I guess the Afghans would be refugees because they are being rescued from their homeland.
Yes. The United States is serving as a place of refuge, whereas the Haitians are being qualified as migrants because they voluntarily migrated. If that makes sense, that's basically the distinguishment between the two. But my argument would be, just as the United States sent planes to Afghanistan to rescue these refugees, I think they should have sent planes to Haiti. I mean, the country was just devastated by a 7.2 magnitude earthquake not even a month ago. A month prior to that, the leader of Haiti, the president, Jovenel Moise, was assassinated. The country is in total and complete turmoil.
I don't even think there's a government right now.
There's a semblance of a government. It's debatable. They do have a prime minister. Prime Minister Ariel Henry, who is a past physician, has been serving. He's under fire for a whole lot of stuff that we can talk about on another episode. But there is a prime minister in place. What there's not, Gittel, is there's not a Congress, there's not a Senate, there's not a parliament. The elected officials that all fall under the jurisdiction of the president, there's none of that. There's not a president either. So only thing that they really have in place is the judicial system, some of the courts, some of the judges, and then they have the prime minister. Everyone else essentially has either been voted out of office or their terms have ended and expired, and there has not been a new presidential election yet, nor has there been a new municipal election. And so the late President Moise was actually ruling the country under presidential decree, which basically says, what I say goes, not that it had to pass through Congress or Senate, which is how it usually would be.
And you know, it's interesting that you've mentioned there really is no structure, no political structure at this time. So when I heard Mallorca said, oh, there is stability, they can go back home, really? It's like they're trying to really justify what has happened. So, but anyhow, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right. From what I understand, you know, not only have deportation started since Sunday, so there are a number of people who've been repatriated. Tell us, do you have an update for us, Winnie?
In terms of people who've been repatriated, they're saying the number is a little bit over 1,000 people. Initially, they were doing 3 flights a day between Okap, Cap Haitian, and Port-au-Prince. They were repatriating people to both places. But actually, I've heard that there's a great amount of there's a lot of chaos going on actually when these people are landing. They haven't been in the country for 5-10 years, so it's utter chaos. B, Haiti has a series of violent crimes that are going on, whether it's armed robbery, kidnapping, or murder. And so they're landing in a country that has very little order, as we just talked about. And so the scenario is not good. Also, Haiti is one of those islands that is known for remittances. What remittances are, it means that when you come to the United States, if you're the one who made it out of the family, you send money back. Haiti is one of the countries that does this the most. Remittances is like the biggest thing. That's why Western Union makes so much money. But the thing about it is, can you imagine you were the one that made it out? You were probably supporting your entire family back home, and now you've come back with nothing. That's the other thing. The Afghani refugees were given at least $2,000, when they were going through this process. These Haitian migrants were given $100, put on a plane and sent back home when most of them had given up their entire life's earnings to even get there. And so now they're returning home with nothing in a country that they don't know, in a country where the employment rate is outrageous, in a country that currently doesn't have a president, in a country that's been currently devastated by a natural disaster. So the hope of the country right now has been waning, and so it's actually quite tragic situation when people arrive home.
You've mentioned $100. It is my understanding, and based on what I've heard, they have given $1,000 per migrant. Now, whether or not that $1,000, as some of the migrants indicated, they will never see that money.
Mm.
So it's pretty, it's very hard. It's very, very hard. I heard a gentleman mention he sold his house, he sold, his furniture, everything, more than $17,000 to make the trip to Texas. And who is he paying that money to?
It's really, really sad. I think the money goes when you sell your house, when you sell it, those monies were his earnings to start a new life, in the States. And oftentimes, getting all the way from Colombia to Chile, all the way up South and Central America, it's not cheap, especially you're doing the road by foot essentially. And so you have to have money to feed and provide for your family. You have to have money for lodging. You have to have money for whatever you're doing along the way. So it's really not a cheap journey. And oftentimes, like I said, people have been out in these countries for years, so who of us can live off $17,000? None of us realistically. So it's a really arduous situation. It's really, really sad. I certainly think bringing back a bunch of people with no plan on how to get them work, no plan on how to get them housing, what we're going to see, Gatel, is a spike in violence, because all you have is a bunch of restless and hungry people. I mean, literally hungry, because they don't have employment that's assured to them. And so what are they going to do? Oftentimes people commit crimes out of need, not out of want, and not because they're evil people. Poverty breeds crime. And that's the situation that we're most likely going to see in Haiti.
And I cannot imagine more violence. I cannot imagine more chaos at this time in Haiti. So we just got to keep Haiti in our prayers. So this has been a wonderful dialogue, Kuni. I thank you so much for joining us and really shedding a little bit of light on what's going on. I pray that they stop the deportation and really continue to ensure that they understand these family circumstances before they send them back to Haiti. So
absolutely. And if I might, Gatel, I know that I'll send you the article over, but I would encourage everyone to, follow my writings on the Griot. The Griot is one of the largest African-American newspapers, digital newspapers. And so I will send the links to Gatel so you can link some of my more recent writings on Haiti, including the one that I published most recently, because I think we're going to, as a community, need a lot more deeper understanding of what's going on and the root causes of this issue, so that when things like this happen, we're not caught in a state of shock. And so I'm happy to provide you those links, and we can link them below this. So I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity. So I thank you for thinking of me.
Thank you again. And I will be more than happy to share your stories. Actually, I look forward to reading them each time I read them. It's great to get the perspective of a millennial. You guys, you are the up and comers, and I just love your writing, Winkuni. Thank you so much, and have a good evening.
Thank you. You as well.
Tonight, Coach Dorothy will not be joining us, so it's just me and my guest. But on a more serious note, it appears the administration is moving in the right direction. Several measures have taken place this week because of the outrage. It is my understanding that over 600 Homeland Security agents have been sent, and it is to ensure that the migrants get due process. Due process meaning that someone gets to hear their situation, and from there, it is determined whether or not they should be deported back home or to the country where they came from, but most importantly, be released to family members if they have relatives here in the United States. Compatriots in the diaspora are also taking an active role in helping those in Texas. We need interpreters, lawyers, people are distributing different items. So we as the Haitian community and other communities as well are going to Del Rio to really ensure that our people get the support that they need and know that they are not by themselves. Unfortunately, what we've seen this week, I don't believe it's a Democrat or a Republican issue. It is due to an immigration system that is broken. There will be other situations, as we've seen before, where our compatriots are being mistreated or deported. We're hoping not. But we in the diaspora, we must always be prepared to be the voice, to be the eyes and the ears of our brothers and sisters who do not have a voice and are vulnerable. And we've got to stand in solidarity with them and let them know we're there for them. So, with that, I want to thank you again for joining us this evening for the GRN show. And until next Saturday,